Okay, so today we're going to look at measuring progress against the program. And the way we measure progress is by choosing a set date called a status date and measuring the progress on that date and then applying it to the program so that we get a tracking through the program of how the work is progressing. Now, a status date could be every day, it could be every week, it could be every month, or some other point in time depending on what's required. Generally, there would be a requirement under the contract to report at least once a month, and in order to do that you pick the date you're going to measure, and at that point in time you collate how far through every job is and then calculate percentage complete and then report on from that date. So the first thing we have to do is set a status date. Now you can see in this program that the work starts on the 8th of June. So let's say we're going to have a status measure on the last working day of the month. So I then need to set the status date as being the 30th of June. And the way I set the status date is first to go into the project tab and go along to this button here. And as you can see, this at the moment is saying the 8th of June, which is our start date for the job. So I'm going to change it to the 30th of June, or the last working day in the month, on the assumption the 30th of June is a working day. So yep, 30th of June is a working day, and click OK. Now you see nothing has actually changed other than that date, and that's because at the moment the status date is not showing on the program. And the way I get it to show is to right click on the Gantt chart and go to grid lines, and then scroll down the options till I arrive at status date. And at the moment you can see there is no line type assigned to it, so I'm going to make it a straight line and I'm going to color it in red. And now you see the end of the month is showing up here. So what I'm saying now is that at this date I'm going to check all of the progress through these jobs, whether they've started, whether they've finished, if they haven't finished, how much progress there is on them, whether they're 20%, 50%, whatever. Now, in its most simplest form, updating the program is as simple as essentially typing in a percentage complete. So I can either type it in here. You notice I've inserted a column saying percentage complete, and I can say this job is done 100%, and you see it changes to green. By same token, I could type in 50% for the next job, and I also have an option in the task tab where I have sort of predetermined buttons: 25%, 50%, 75 and 100. So I could say this job is 100% by clicking the button. I could say this job is 50% by clicking the button, and you can see how it's updating the jobs that go. Now I also have another option, because this is the status date. If all of this work if I was happy that all of this work is bang up to date and is progressed up to today's date, there's been no delays, everything is working fine, I could literally just drag all of these down to here and press this button that says mark on track. And what the mark on track button does is it updates all of these tasks up to the point of crossing the status date line. So if I say mark on track, it marks all of these up. You notice these ones, because they haven't reached the status date is before them, they haven't altered. Now this is all very well to a point, but you notice that these jobs now are all assuming that the job started when they should do, finished when they should, and are all perfectly in line. But let's say this one, instead of being 36% through, is 75% through. Now you're seeing that the progress is showing beyond today's date and through here. So nothing is actually changing on the program other than the fact that I'm saying the percentage complete, is full. but it's not affecting the program in any way other than to say these jobs are fixed. And that isn't reality, because how can this job, show that I'm finishing work and the work is finished a week ahead? It's not really what's happening. And this is a very simple way to show percentage complete, but it's not a dynamic way of showing percentage complete. In other words, it's not recalculating the program for reality. And this really is not doing the job that we need it to do. So how do I get it to do the job that I need it to do? Well, first, let's take all of these back to zero and make a few changes. Okay, now there are additional tools for updating which are not immediately apparent, and they're sort of not exactly hidden, but you have to know where they are in order to switch them on, and they control different aspects of how you update. Now, if I just ignore this for the time being, I move down to these here. Now here's just two tasks. Here's my status state, and there's a job that should have started 3 weeks ago and finished a week ago, and there's a job that's not due to start for 2 weeks and it's going to run for 2 weeks. Now let's say that both of these jobs are at 50% complete on the day that I go to do my measure. So you can see here now that 50% complete, 50% complete, but I'm actually here in time. And this work that's complete is fair enough. It may well have started on June the 10th when it was supposed to, but this work that's still to do, the earliest that now that this remaining work can happen is actually today, because I can't start the work in the past. And likewise, this work in the future, I can't finish this work in the future. So this work, as of today's date, is here. It's been done already, and the remaining work is still to do. Now, as I said before, this is not a true reflection of reality if I'm standing on site today. So we changed the way in which the project calculates these things and what it does with them. And the way we change this is in a set of tasks or task commands that are hidden away in the options. So if I go to the options button and in the advanced tab and scroll to the bottom, there are calculation options for this program, and you notice there are 4 buttons here. Okay, now what these buttons relate to, they're not very clearly defined or easy to read exactly what it's saying in the way they've worded. It's not good, but essentially it's saying 2 things. We've got 2 sets of commands, this one and this one, for work that is in the future, and 2 commands for work that is in the past. And if I go through each one of these in turn and show you the effect, this first button here, if I tick this button, is essentially saying that for work that is in the future, that has already had some progress or is already finished, move the end of the work back to the status date, back to today's date. Okay, now if I click OK on that, and I'll show you what that means on this. Now this is work in the future. If we say it's 50%, you see now it's moved the 50% of the work that's been completed back to today's date. However, it leaves this work in the future still to be done in the future. Now, in some circumstances, that's exactly what you want to do. Now, what you could also say is that if this work is 50% through and has already been done, then there is nothing to stop this work. At the moment, it's not linked to anything. In these 2 examples, they're not linked to each other. They're just 2 standalone tasks. So if I could start this early, and I'm now 50% through, what is stopping me from carrying on this work and doing it here? And that's the point of the second tool within that group. So if I just Control Z to put this back as was, if I go back into the options and advanced, and now I tick the second box in the future commands and click OK. Now if I say it's 50% through here now, you see it moves the 50% that's complete back, and it also moves the remaining work back to the status state. So if I go back into if I go back into the options, and as I say, the advanced tab, scroll to the bottom. So as you can say, it doesn't word it very clearly, but essentially what it's saying is move the end of work that's in the future, that's been finished, back to the status state, and move the start of the remaining work back to the status state. Now that then brings us on to the work that's in the past. So the first one here says move the start of remaining work forward to the status state. So if the work has started in the past, so if I'll tick the box and we'll look at this other option. So this work that was supposed to start 3 weeks ago, if I now say that this is 50% complete, it's marked up that it's 50% complete. It's assumed that the work has started when it should do on the 10th of June, and it's moved the remaining work to do, because it can't start a week ago or 2 weeks ago. The earliest it can start is today, so it's moved it back out to here. Okay, now if I just reverse that again and we go and enter the fourth option, again advanced tabs down to the bottom. Now the fourth option is saying move the end of completed parts forward to the status state. So if I click OK on that, if I now say that this job is 50% complete, it moves the 50% up to the status line, because I don't know necessarily when this work actually started. And generally when work is ongoing on site, the most important things you need to know is, has the work started? Has the work finished? If it hasn't finished, how much progress is there on it? But the other thing you need to know is, when did the work actually start and when did it actually finish? Because whilst it might not be so important today, in 9 months' time, when there are other delays or arguments or disputes, when this work actually started could actually become quite important. Now, if your site manager doesn't know when the work actually started, the only thing you know for certain is where it stands at today's date. So rather than assume that the work started when it was supposed to, move it to the line so that the work potentially has started later. You don't know. Now, the reason for doing this is there could be an argument further down the line where, even if this job is not on critical path, it might have, say, 20 days of slack. If you start 10 days late and it's a 10-day job, then you've still got 10 days of slack. It's not affecting your critical path. It's not affecting your finish date. All it's doing is chewing up available slack. But the chain of work that follows on from this are also losing the slack. Now, as you come closer to the end of the job, all of this amount of slack is being reduced by various circumstances, and it's all becoming more condensed as you get closer to the end. The effect of this job starting late could knock something later in the job over into critical, and it could form the basis of an extension of time claim. One of the key arguments you always get back from a client as to try and refuse an extension of time is to say, well, if you'd have started the job here when it was supposed to have been started, you wouldn't need the extension of time because it wouldn't have been critical, etc. Now, the reason that this job potentially has started late could be because of a delay caused by the client. Now, it's not an extension of time claim at this point, but later on it could feed into something that does. So it's important that you can at least show the chain of events that have gotten you to the position. And by saying the job started on time, you might actually be shooting yourself in the foot for a later argument. So if you don't know when the date of actually something started, when you're doing a status update, this is actually a far safer way to go, is to do it like this, so that all you know for certain is at this point it was here. And as it's a 10-day job, it assumes that the job started 5 days before today. Now you can see how turning on and off these different controls have different effects. Okay, and now we've got them all turned on in the program. I'll just take these back to 0, and we'll go back now and look at the program. And before we go any further, we just need to remember that we're tracking the progress, and we're going to illustrate the progress over a period of time to a client. So what we want to be doing every month as we're doing these status updates is to baseline the program so that we have a snapshot of where the program is at each stage. So originally, I would normally have taken a baseline at this job as the job started at day 1. Obviously, because I've set this up as a sample, I haven't done that. And so what we're going to do now is we'll set up a baseline for this program so that it shows as it is at the start date. All the baseline is a snapshot of the program at any given point in time. And the way I set a baseline is to go up to the project tab, and the button here says set baseline, and I'm going to set the baseline for the whole entire project. And the baseline I'm using is going to be the first one, which will be baseline 0. And this is, again, nothing showing here, but when I go to the Format tab and turn on the baseline, you can see I've got one saved. And this is a snapshot of this program showing where every task is, when everything is expected to happen. Now, when you start a job, the very first day you start on the job, this is your baseline program. This is how you plan to do the job for the entirety of the project. At the end of the first month or the first week or wherever you're doing your status date, you will ensure that you have included any jobs that have affected, any delays or things that have changed or have affected the program in some way. And to give you an example of that, let's say here, this job, something happens along this job, and we're just coming to the end of this job, and I don't know, let's say there's something missing, hasn't been supplied, and we've got a delay event sitting here. Just a very, very simple. I'll call it delay 1, and it might be, I don't know, say 6 days. Now, if I just drag out to, sorry, skip that. If I just drag out the bar to show my predecessors and successors. So this delay is not interfering with the end of this, getting this job done, but it is going to delay the start of this one. So it will be following task 28, and it will be preceding, or it will be a predecessor to task 29, so 35. Now you can see there straight away, and I'll just change the formatting of this so that as a delay, so it makes it more explicit. Okay, so now if I just turn off the baseline for a moment, so now you can see this task now, this delay, and I'll highlight this as well, just with a bit of color, put it there. So delay 1 is holding up the job for 6 days. Now you notice here that nothing has actually changed in terms of the job finishing, because quite simply there's a lot of slack in the job. You can see all of this in this chain of work that runs through here. There's the last job in this chain, finishes here, and the finish date is over here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 3.5 weeks, nearly 4 weeks of slack. So even though this job has taken up 6 days, it's not interfering with the finish date. However, if I turn back on the baseline, you can see now how originally this task was supposed to have started here, and this now has pushed out the start of this job. So this was the original baseline of where things were supposed to happen, and now because of this delay they've pushed to the right of the baseline, which means that it's now running later. Anything that is running to the right of the baseline is running late. Anything that is showing before the baseline would be finishing early. And to give you an example of that very, very quickly, if this is a 10-day job and I cut that down to 5, you can see how now it's moving to the left of the baseline because it's running ahead. Okay, so that just then gives us a way of easily seeing how things have changed in the month. Okay, now as we start to update the program, and I'll turn off the baseline again just to avoid confusing the issue as we go. So as we now start to update progress, we'll just have a look at the options and make sure all of the switches that we want turned on are turned on. So in the advanced, down to the bottom. So I've got all of my 4 controls there are all switched on. So that's all good. Now, if I know when these works actually started, I can input the dates so that I'm getting accurate dates. And the way I would do that when I'm updating progress is these are the planned dates. I'm going to insert a couple of additional columns. One is called actual start, and the next one is going to be called actual finish. So insert column, actual finish. Now you see at the moment they both say not applicable. At the moment there's been no progress marked in or anything, and I'll just center them just to make them a bit easier to see. Okay, so now let's say this job was supposed to start on the 8th of June but didn't actually start, say, until the 10th of June. So I've got on the 10th, oops, and not the 10th of August, 10th of June. So 10th of June. Okay, so I've now moved the job out a little bit. And basically it's telling me now it should finish. If it takes 5 days, it should finish on the 16th of June. But let's say they actually took 6 days. So instead of starting on the 16th of June, it actually finished on the 17th of June. And again, I really should check the month at the top and make sure I'm still looking at the right month. Okay, so 10th of June. So what it's actually done is it's changed my duration, but it's inserted the days when it actually started. Okay, now if I say this job is also complete, but I don't know what dates it started, I'll go to the task tab and I'll just use the quick 100%. Now you see it's telling me that because I've said it's 100%, I don't know when it started, so all it's doing is assuming there. So if I just jig out to that again, so you can see it should have started here, and I don't know when it started, but I do know it's finished. So I move it and it moves everything to here. Now what about this job? Also, if I just Control Z and go back, this job should also be complete by today. And if it is, that's all well and good. I can actually mark them both, say 100%. And you can see now it's still pushing everything to this line because I don't know the dates. So I knew the dates for this one. I don't know the dates for these two. So it's recalculating the job as we go. And you notice what's happening here. If I just bring this back here, at the moment, I've got this work running through here. If I mark these two, because this was a critical path job, you notice down here it's actually added days because this job started later and took longer. And if I actually just turn on the baseline again, you can see the job was supposed to have started 2 days before, and in point of fact, here's where the job was starting originally, and we've now added through to here. So it's taken an extra 3 days and it's moved me out by 3 days. So immediately I'm still only in the first few tasks and it's telling me I've got a problem and I need to look at how I can pull the job back, bring it back into line. Okay, so now let's go back up to the top and we'll carry on. Now, first thing I'll do is I'll just turn off the baseline because we don't need to see it on. Now, going back to, as we were saying before, you saw how I could type in 100% here and it will move the program out and say this is also 100%, and it just rearranges obviously to the end is on the status state. But if I can just Control Z quickly and show you the benefit of using the mark on track tool. So as we know, this job pushed out. Now I can use the mark on track to update this rather than just 100%, and just into task, mark on track, and you see it fills it in as if it started and finished when it was supposed to, which pretty much for this scenario, if we're saying that this is 100%, it already is. Now, if I mark this one as being marked on track, so it updates to there, so where we are here. Now that's saying it's 55%. Let's just look at the changes that it makes. If say it's instead of being 50%, it's at 40%. Now I can either type in 40 or I can literally click to choose. So if I say 40%, click OK, and you see it's slightly, it adjusted, it moved it over slightly to allow for the fact that it's running a bit later. Okay. So it's dynamically changing all of the dates to suit what's happening as per my update. Now, likewise with these, we know this is now a delay. We're up to this point. I'll mark this as all on track as well. And that essentially now is the end of my update for this month. Now, in this case, all of the tasks that are before the status date are dealt with. Let's imagine now we are going to move on to the next month. So before I do that, this now is where the baseline is sitting. If I turn back on the baseline quickly just to look at that. So this is where the baseline is sitting from last month. This is how things have changed from last month. Now, at this point, as regards my reporting goes, I'll turn off the baseline. This is my up-to-date as at 30th of June. Okay, so at this point, I would save the program and I would also save a new baseline. So I'll go into project and basically, where am I? Sorry, set baseline. And I'm now, there's the first baseline. I'm now going to save a new baseline, being baseline 1, for the entire project. Okay, and if I turn this baseline on now, into the format tab, turn on baseline 1, you'll see that it now reflects where everything is sitting at now. Now this is important because when you are reporting for a PCG meeting or whatever, you really want to be showing day 1 is revision A of the program, and that's your intended program for the job coming up. Okay, at the end of the first month, you show the changes, you track all of the changes and the events that have happened. You save a new baseline and you save the program at that point as revision B. So at that point, when you print the program out, you can show the changes against the original program. So you're reporting on the last month, and that becomes your as-built program for the last month, and it's the proposed program for the remainder of the job. So if we now move on by a month and we go to, we set our status date to the end of July. So again, into project, I set status date now for the last working day in July, which is the 31st, and it's a Friday. Click OK. Now you see our baseline has moved out to here, and we go through the same process again in terms of updating. Now I can update as this was on track, but again, I may not know when it started. If I do know where the dates and it started and finished, I can fill in the actual starts and the actual finishes. If I don't know, all I can say for certain is where it is now. Now, as you can see on the program, by rights, anything now before this date should all be complete up to this date if I'm on track. Okay, but let's start looking at the issues of things happening if maybe they're not complete and things have not gone as fast as I want. So let's say that this job, instead of being 100%, is, I don't know, let's say it's 80%. Now, obviously, of course, it's going to alter how the program is working. Now, you see it's changed the program to suit what I'm being told. Now, this task may not have finished because there may be something holding up part of it. This job is set as a successor to it, which essentially the logic is that when this job finishes, this one can start. But very, very often, jobs can start out a sequence, they just maybe can't finish completely, or you can do so much. And so let's say on this one, they've actually been able to do, say, 50% of this task. So you can see now that it's moved the 50% through. This hasn't moved back with it because it's still trying to match the logic. It's still trying to carry the logic. So the remaining work is staying in the logical sequence of this job finishes, then this one can carry on. Now let's say this one is also, say, 50%. And again, you can see, although I've got 50%, it's trying to manage the logical sequence. Let's say with this now, that this job is now 100%. I know when it started, but I don't know necessarily when the last bit of this finished. So if I mark it as 100%, it now moves out because I don't know when the work actually carried on. It may have finished earlier, I don't know. All I know at this point is that it's finished as of today. And let's say that this is now, say, 75% complete. So again, you can see how the program is moving in and out to suit. Let's move down through this, and let's say I know this started on track. So it started when I expected to start it. So if in my task tab, it's mark on track here. I actually have a number of tools along here, and my mark on track here, because rather than have to keep jumping backwards and forwards between the different tabs, I put tools that I want to use here that I use a lot, so that I don't have to go down. And how this is done, I'll cover it in a different video. But essentially, my mark on track I can have there to hand. Okay. Now let's say this job again. Now we've had lots of problems on this job, and this job is actually only 75%. This next task is also 75%. And again, you can see how it's trying to maintain the logic. Now let's say there's nothing on the next task, but the next task is 50%. Again, you see it tries to maintain the logic and carry everything through. And obviously the effect on critical path and the finish date of the job is being calculated as we go. Okay, now I just want to wind back a little bit because I want to show you a couple of things here. Let's say now that this job hasn't actually been started yet. Okay, so I can say, well, the job should have started, but it hasn't yet started. I can mark it as 0 and, sorry, change the name to 0. I can, nothing's happening. Now, if this is where I actually am, I'll say that this job is 50%, just for sort of sake of showing something's happened here. So none of this job has started. This one has started 50%. I've marked all of my updates here. Now, this is obviously only a small job, and there's only, at any given point in this job now, there's only half a dozen things. But what if you had a job where in the given month there might be 300 tasks that need to be updated, and a lot of tasks haven't yet started, etc. Well, once I've done the percentages update of the stuff that has happened, stuff like this that is still sitting as 0%, I need to update this, because obviously this job now can't start until here, but because it hasn't started, I can either sort of drag it over, and it's telling me all sorts of issues around scheduling conflicts, etc. But what I do when I update my program now is there is another button in the project tab which says update project. So I update all of my progress. The things that haven't progressed, I want them all to move up to today's date, because this can't start 3 weeks ago. It can only start the earliest today, or in fact, since this is a Friday afternoon in this case, it would start Monday morning. So this button here, update project, will run through the project, and anything that hasn't started, it will move up to the status state. So press OK, and it's asking me what it is I want to do. And what I actually want to do is, it gives me a few options. Do I want to set anything as either 0 or 100%, or, you know, what I actually want to do is I want to reschedule uncompleted work to start after today's date, being my status date. Okay, and I want to do it for the entire project. So I do have options here where I could select a certain number of tasks and I can control what I do. But in this case, I'm doing the whole program. So if I click OK, and now it reschedules everything to the earliest point in which it can start. So as you can see there, and this is the truth of the program, and this is now the truth of my finish date. And if I now bring up my baselines, if I look first at my baseline, my original baseline, you can see things have moved out quite a lot, because here was my original finish date, and it's now moved out from, where are we there, that was the 15th of October. I'm now out to the 2nd of November. But that was the month before last. Last month's baseline is this one, and my finish date at that point, I just hover over this, it should light up for me, and it's sod's law it isn't doing so. But you can see now how things have changed there. That was the original, this is now first, and it's recalculating. So at this point, I would save a new baseline, save the program, and this will become now my revision C, and I'll report on the changes since last month. So as I've got there now, so this is my revision A, this is my revision B, and if I go into the project tab now and set a baseline, and now I'm going to set my next empty one, which is here, and this will now be the baseline as of today. Again, going into the wrong thing, into format tab, into turn on my baseline too. So you can see how, and it's tracking all of the changes, so I can report on the changes. The reason I do one every month is because when I'm reporting progress, I want to focus on what I want to talk about. I'm controlling the conversation with the client. If things are creating an issue over a few months and getting gradually worse, or there's a delay that's been going on for a while, I don't want them to keep bringing up and using it as a stick to beat you for the next 6 months. So deal with the problem in the month it happens, deal with the effect of where we're at, and then next month, deal with next month's problems. The month after that, deal with the month after's problems. Control the arguments, control the discussions to what you want to talk about, in terms of focusing on the things you want to focus on. And by doing it month by month like this, it's easy to actually control the conversation and any things, but you've always got the original ones to refer back to if you're making an extension of time claim. So you can still pick up and tell the story running through. Now, if I turn off this baseline again, so we can see now how each month is telling the story of what's happening. We can track stuff, we can see the effect, and we can look for ways to solve the problems or pull things back. So earlier you get information that's useful to you, the better. There's various tools you can use to control the way in which it moves through and updates, and you can turn on and off features as you need to update in the way you want to update. But all in all, once you get your head around it, it's quite a simple process. It's just understanding how project calculates these things and how it reacts dynamically to work out where your finish date is. As always, I hope that's been of use to you. If you've got any questions, I'll put my email on at the end of the video. Flick me a question and I'll see what I can do to help you out.